Hello and welcome to e-DIRAP interviews. Today we're focusing on India, and joining us today is Madanmohan Rao, author and consultant in knowledge management, ICT for D, innovation, new media, and many more. Madan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, and a very good morning from Bangalore, where the monsoons are just beginning.
Good morning. First of all, Madan, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you have been working on recently?
Yeah, I'm an author and a consultant in a number of fields, all connected with knowledge and creativity, which is knowledge management, innovation, startup entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, etc. I grew up in Pune in Western India, went to college in Bombay, went to grad school in the US, then I worked in Brazil, Italy, Singapore, and then came back to Bangalore. So I do a lot of work these days with 3 or 4 clients in India and abroad. One is in new media, how to use the internet, social media, mobile, etc. The second is in innovation, how are organizations becoming more creative, and the third is in ICT for D and M for D, which is how can government agencies, NGOs, and startups get involved in social applications of ICTs. So half my work is consulting, helping organizations use these technologies, and the other half is in writing. I publish books, articles, columns, blogs on these topics. So I've done about 12 books, all are on Amazon. I used to also write the India chapter, I think, for a couple of years for DIRAP, and it is other books. I think IDRC also funded a book on ICT for D in Asia, based on 5 years of their pilot projects in Asia.
Thank you. And you just released a new book on global mobile.
Yeah, that's the latest baby. Thank you. This is the book fresh hot of the press as of last week. It's called Global Mobile Applications and Innovations for the Global Mobile Ecosystem. So this is a
Congratulations.
collection of essays by 31 experts from around the world, from all continents, writing about industry issues, policy, psychology, content, and ICT for D. So it's just come out. It's on Amazon. It's also going to be in print in different parts of the world.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Could you tell us the key message, some of the key messages from the book? A little bit more
Yeah.
about the book and what are the key messages?
Yeah, one key message of the book is that mobile is sort of like ICT for D phase two. The first phase was computers and the internet, and this was in the dot-com years. A lot of people had hopes that the internet and PCs and whatnot would bring the fruits of democratic access to information to a lot of people. But internet growth was much slower than expected in many emerging economies, partly because the model at that time was dial-up internet, and the penetration of telecom lines to rural parts of the emerging economies was very low. So unfortunately, a lot of people lost interest in ICT for D. They began to think this is not the area that we hope to have. But what they didn't watch was they weren't keeping their eyes on mobile. And suddenly mobile came from the sidelines almost and quickly became center stage in the highest piece of technology that people could own personally in their pockets. So a lot of people compare this to what watches were about 100 years back. Everybody had watches, and that was the highest piece of technology that people could carry at a personal level. Now, cell phones have taken over that space, and even in cell phones, the early stage was, of course, voice and then SMS. Now we are seeing smartphones and tablets, and as the costs keep dropping, people are taking a relook at ICT 4D under the mobile gaze. So now we are seeing very interesting models such as IVR, interactive voice response based development models such as dissemination of information. We are seeing SMS alerts for healthcare. We are seeing educational services such as reminders of vocabulary tests and things of that sort done through SMS. So even if you look at the basic humble SMS, we're seeing a lot of traction in that space. And now with smartphones, we're seeing much more of visually rich content coming into this space. So that has been a good finding from the book, which is in sectors from health to financial inclusion, there are more people with mobile phones than bank accounts. So now suddenly this whole field of micropayments, mobile payments is taking off, especially in countries like Kenya. So that has been a very interesting finding, which is also that innovations are now coming not just from traditional mature economies and then appearing in emerging economies after that, but now innovations are springing up in all different ways in parts of the world where people never even guessed these kinds of innovations could come. So Africa, Kenya, India, Bangladesh, Brazil, all of these countries are coming up with some amazing innovations in mobile.
In the book, is there any particular innovation based in India that particularly stand out to you?
Yeah, we have quite a few examples from South Asia. Actually, one of the chapters is based on the M billionth awards for best mobile content from South Asia. So some examples are mobile payment services. There are many mobile payment services which allow city migrant workers to send money through mobiles to kiosks and other mobile operators in their villages. So there are at least 3 or 4 companies and NGOs in this space. We are seeing learning of language augmented by SMS as taking off. So people are learning languages like English, etc., through SMS. We're also seeing SMS-based newspapers. So people working together in one neighborhood, collecting news in the form of headlines, etc., by SMS and broadcasting it to people. So we're even seeing community media as a form of mobile coming up in South Asia, in Sri Lanka and India, for instance. And Bangladesh, of course, is known for a lot of its gramming phone kind of models, which is the village ladies. She walks around with the phone and people make calls on that phone. That was old hat. Now it's more of micro payment that's coming through the mobile phone.
See, thank you. Um, from your blogs, I see that you've been looking closely into startups and innovations in social enterprises. What has spurred your interest in these areas?
Yeah, one other problem in the early ICT4D movement was they were looking mostly at ICT4D as something which big organizations do. How do big NGOs do this stuff? How do big government agencies do it? How do universities use the internet for education, learning, etc.? But what they forgot was there's also a very strong entrepreneurial component now. Startups used to be something which you create like maybe a factory or a garment shop or something. Now startups is 3 or 4 college kids getting together in a cafe, using the Wi-Fi network to get online, using cloud services like WordPress to launch web content and things of that sort. So suddenly the nature of innovation itself has changed. It's much easier now, especially in the app economy. Theoretically, you can create an app in your bedroom, put it up on iTunes and get customers around the world and make money from day one. This has never been possible in the in the world of innovation before, which is to go from concept to cash in just a matter of days. So there actually is a huge amount of excitement, especially in the younger generation, on creating apps for all kinds of things. Obviously, a lot of it is just fun and entertainment and maybe frivolous kind of stuff for apps, but a lot of it is very good social kind of stuff. Startups looking at, for instance, we just had this hackathon in 3 cities in India, and some of the things which youth are looking at are how to use apps to reduce food wastage by telling hotels to announce when they have extra food after a function. There are people saying, let's do organ donation, blood donation apps so that you can find out who needs blood and whether I can give blood to somebody in my immediate neighborhood. There are other people looking at apps for things like education, how to teach kids languages by using the touchscreen interface. A big problem with the old model of ICT4D is we had the traditional keyboard, which had a very unusual looking keypad and all that stuff. But now with when you use a touchscreen interface, it's much more visually rich. And kids can start typing even before they can use a keyboard. So we're seeing some very interesting innovations coming out. And the other finding is these innovations come much more naturally to the younger generation because they're growing up digital. I grew up in the world of desktops and PCs and all that, so my view of smartphones, etc., is they're extensions of what I do. But when you grow up with nothing but a smartphone or a mobile phone, your view is completely different. So the way they are seeing problems and solutions, etc., is completely different from the way we do. That is why I began to take a look very closely at this phenomenon of startups. How do people get this creative urge? How do they harness technology? How do they look at a social problem and map it onto technology flows, etc.? And I think that is where the huge action is going to be in the coming years. Startups, social enterprises, etc.
Yeah, I did a search on innovation and India, and I see that there is quite a lot of interest on building ICT innovation, and ICT innovation is becoming a priority in India. What do you think is driving this innovation and this priority?
One is the overall growth of the economy itself. India's economy opened up only in the 90s, and only about 10 years later, you could see the benefits through the proliferation of telecom sector, ISP, mobiles, handsets, and so on. That's one part of it, the overall economic growth. The second is a very strong demographic dividend, sort of. India has a huge population, of course, but interestingly, a huge proportion of it is youth. So a lot of people are very young. These are the guys who are grown up digital. They're more plugged into these kinds of tools than we are. And third is the continuing dropping costs of these devices. So even though it is still a bit expensive in India, it's much cheaper definitely than laptops and desktops and so on. And fourth is the ecosystem itself has matured. If 5, 6 years ago you said you were doing a mobile startup, people would be like, what is that? And what are you going to do? How are you going to make money? But now there's enough of a buzz. For instance, I do research for a startup magazine called Your Story, yourstory.in. and this is a whole magazine only about startups. And we profile startups across India. There are an estimated maybe 10,000 startups in India, and we write about them, categorize them, classify them, talk about their ecosystem, their growth, etc. Today, in the big cities, at least like Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, almost every month there are three events, at least 3 to 5 events about startups, whether it's mobile startups or social startups, energy startups, etc. So now for a young company getting into the space, a college student wanting to get into the startup space, or even interestingly enough, a mid-career person who's had enough of the corporate life and says, I want to strike out on my own. Now there's a chance for them to find out, to network with people, meet investors, meet angels, meet developers and all that stuff. So the ecosystem has finally matured in India. So these are four things which I think have come together very well in India.
Thank you. You mentioned about these various events that are being organized, not only in India but around the world, things like
Yes.
hackathons and app development contests, gov camps, so getting the government agencies, getting citizens involved in developing applications to solve development challenges. Um, so I see a lot online about these events happening, but what I don't see is what happens after these events. So a lot of these events are being promoted and people are coming together, so we see that. But um, I'm interested in finding out, the what happens behind the scene in designing these events and following up on these events, and how these ideas are then taken forward.
Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, a lot of people say this is just the tip of the iceberg, and you're right. There's a huge amount of behind the scenes stuff which happens. I'll give you 2, 3 examples. One is, for instance, the Mobile Monday network. I'm also part of a network called Mobile Monday. This started up in Helsinki in the year 2000. Now it is in 140 cities around the world. This is a monthly meetup, usually on a Monday. That's why it's called Mobile Monday. And mobile startups get together and talk about in our city, in our country, what is happening. What can we do? What are some apps we can develop, etc. So behind the scenes, what's happening is a group of startups get together and plan the event. They also look for sponsors, and sometimes these sponsors are government agencies who want to fund more of these incubators. For instance, in Uganda, in Kenya, etc., we've had a number of government agencies stepping in to fund innovation hubs, innovation hives, collaborative creative spaces, etc. And they fund Mobile Monday to bring mobile startups to come and work in this space. The government gives them space, gives them some matching funds, and then also gives them some promotional help to get this information out there. So that's one thing which happens. A government agency can come in and help in the form of an incubator. The second thing that we do, for instance, among other things with your story in India, is we also bring investors into the group, both private investors and social investors. So we often get requests from investors saying, I want to invest in e-commerce space, but looking at rural e-commerce. So can you organize an event where one panel is consisting of maybe 5 or 10 startups? You organize a small competition, you put together a jury, and we'll fund you to bring these startups, and we will pick the top 3 and fund them on to go ahead and do their actual business plans and so on. So that's another behind the scenes stuff which happens, which is investors, both private and social, coming to get involved in the space. And the third thing which happens now is some of the big companies will organize these competitions and then do mentoring for them through what's called an accelerator program. So this is the Nokia model. They have something called an app campus in Finland. So they have these hackathons in India, Philippines, I guess various other countries in Africa. And they pick what they think are the top 4 or 5 apps, take them to Finland, give them support in the form of mentoring with technology wizards and support from the overall Nokia ecosystem, tie up with operators, etc., and then push them out into the market. So this is the big guys also getting involved. Of course, they got a vested interest, which is they want to see people using Nokia apps or Windows apps or Android apps, which is okay. That's how the whole ecosystem works. The fourth way things are taking off now is when the startups actually start networking with each other. So one startup is doing maybe a visual recognition interface, another one is doing text to speech. So we facilitate this kind of networking where they come together and say, we can actually form alliances and then promote each other also. So it's not just top down or bottom up, but even horizontal connections with startups that you have to promote.
Can you share some success stories now, or is it still too early for that in
Oh, no, it
terms?
is. Go to, I'll send you a couple of links. There's a couple of links, for instance, on the Nokia hackathon site where they've got examples of 4 or 5 startup developer teams who put together ideas for an app, and now these apps have been launched. So one is, I think, an environmental monitoring kind of an app. You can monitor deforestation or something in your neighborhood, in your city, etc. So some of these examples are already coming out.
So these are
Another
actually, sorry, these are actually being used now by the
Yeah, I
public.
see.
Okay.
Another good example is we had a business plan competition in IIT Bombay, another university in Bombay, and they incubated a company called Webaroo, Webaroo, and they spawned off another product called SMS Gupshup, which means SMS conversation in Hindi, and that is now one of India's top mobile messaging startups. So they become commercially successful. They were incubated by university. They came through a startup competition, and now they've got commercial success. So they're now expanding to 4 or 5 other countries, and they allow people to do pretty much everything that Facebook does, but through SMS. So there are many people who only have feature phones, but they also want to plug into this whole Facebook kind of a world. And they can also integrate that anyway with Facebook by using WhatsApp and things of that sort. So this is a messaging-based social media network. So that's a good example of a startup which came up with through one of these incubator network and business plan events.
Okay, thanks. Um, I'd like to ask you a bit about the social aspect. To what extent are the hackathons or these innovation process to resolve development issues or social problems, to what extent do they involve the end users? And oftentimes they're marginalized groups. Um, to what extent do these marginalized groups who will become the end users of these applications have a voice in the design of these applications?
Great question. Currently, a lot of these hackathons, etc., take place in the big cities. They happen in five-star hotels. They happen in big MNC companies' offices, or they happen in big universities. And most of the developers are urban educated. They are plugged into more technology than other things. So, a big challenge for them, first of all, is to bridge the gap between technology and business. How to write a business model for a startup. How to write a profit, money flow sheet, cash flow sheet, etc. And the third part is how to add a social component on top of all that. So we think this is very hard, especially for new startups to figure out. And the second concern, as you mentioned, is they're not looking entirely at the end users at the moment. They have a few sort of gut feel interactions, such as things like, yeah, if I put this information about missing people, people will use it. But there are also concerns about the police. Will the police accept this kind of a thing? The other one that we looked at was the example I gave you earlier about food donations. They said if a hotel has extra food, they will give it to somebody. But we asked them, have you talked to people about, is this food perishable? What kind of food is it? Is it meat? Does it require to be refrigerated? What's the shelf life of the food that you want to donate after a party, etc.? And they said, no, we haven't yet talked to people like this. So that's the job of people who organize these hackathons and come as jury members, consultants, etc., which is to fill in the missing bits, such as tell them, I think it's a great idea. You need to talk to this food shelter company, this food shelter NGO in the slum. They will tell you how much food they need per week, what kind of food works best for them. Then you do the rest of the homework. You go to hotels and tell them, if you have excess veggies, sell it to this person. If you got excess cooked food, give it to this other NGO, etc. So that is where these pieces have to come together. But the good news is the momentum is beginning. People are realizing that you can crowdsource some of this stuff. These hackathons are now not just one-off events, but they are periodic. They happen every quarter, every month, etc. And if you can build a media component to this and start publishing stories saying, I am looking for this, and do some matchmaking, then it's possible. So technology again comes to the rescue here. You can actually build sites for matchmaking the needs and the requirements of different communities.
Okay, thanks. And to what extent are these startups and social enterprises using open source, adopting open standards, and promoting open content?
Only a few, unfortunately, because a lot of the hackathons come sponsored by
Mm.
corporates who want to promote their own ecosystem. Luckily, some of them are very open as compared to other ones. So, definitely, Android is getting a huge amount of uptake here, and there are more obviously Android users than iPhone, iOS users in most emerging economies. So that's good news. More people will go the relatively more open model of Android as compared to other OSs. Open content, yes, most of them are in this space, but Creative Commons is not that well understood in many areas. For them, free is the easy way to understand it, but they don't understand that free is not the same as common as Creative Commons. So yes, there's a bit of education that has to happen there as well.
Okay. And to what extent is because when you mentioned it seems like it's done by the business community or the enterprise community. What to what extent is the government of India supportive of these innovation and startups? Are they
It's
providing?
not. Yeah, they fund mostly the incubator route. For instance, India has about 60 big active incubators now, and many of them are supported by the Department of Science and Technology from the Indian government. So, for instance, the incubators in IIT Bombay, in the National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad, in BITS Pilani, these are all funded in part by government, also by academic grants and industry. So that has been their preferred approach. To go with the big guys, I think it's very difficult for governments to talk to hundreds of startups all over the country. So maybe the state capitals in India need to step up and get into this space, but they're not. They prefer to big agencies work with big boys, sort of big other organizations. So the big government agencies are working with big incubators right now. Now the challenge is to take this message out beyond the big incubators to the individual startups.
Okay. And what are, I mean, from your experience and for those who, for other countries who want to learn from the experience of India and from your experience, what are the ideal conditions you think are, what is the ideal conditions for enabling innovation in the area of ICT for social and economic development?
Yeah, the key is you have to bring different kinds of communities together and curate some of these gatherings. So you need to bring together definitely developers, because that's where the first step is to understand what this technology can do in terms of creating code, interfaces, services, apps, and so on. The second kind of people that you need is people with somewhat of an entrepreneurship or a business background, either small business or big business. What does it take to launch and register your company, etc. Some countries are extremely bureaucratic in how much time it takes to register a company. India, unfortunately, is one of those. So there is a huge amount of red tape that you must go through to launch your company. So this is where you need some mentorship. So mentorship is a big part of what you need in these communities. The third kind of community you need is the academic community, because they're the ones who will provide you space in the university or the college. They have the domain expertise in terms of at least teaching, for instance, computer languages and things of that sort. And you also need the investor, both the private and the social. The private ones will tell you more about is a product scalable, does it go global easily, is it more of a local product, and the social entrepreneur will tell you more about is this at least sustainable financially, never mind about profits, can you at least break even, and is there a strong social component, what are the issues of responsibility, legal issues, and things of that sort. So you need at least these four kinds of communities to come together. How they come together, how often they come together, where they come together, for how long they come together, how do they stay in touch after they meet. All of these are issues which the startup communities must decide. So in our case, one of my clients, Your Story, has chosen the media route, which is you need something like a content platform to write news, a database of startups, feeds from press releases from investors and the big companies, coordinating events by the various hackathon organizers, etc. So somebody has to aggregate and hold all this content. So we think there's a good space here for either the mainstream media to do this, or definitely the technology media or specialty startup kind of media. So we're seeing some of this in countries in Asia already. Singapore has something called E27, Entrepreneur 27, E27.sg. So this is a big platform for startups in Southeast Asia. They cover Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. And these are platforms where startups can share the news, get written up, get information about investors. They also organize roadshows and things of that sort. In India, we have two or three properties like this. One is called VC Circle. This is more sort of a private VC kind of a website and a news organization. And there's ours, Your Story, which we cover both private and the social sector. So we think there's a huge space now for people who have a journalistic kind of a flair along with an entrepreneurial attitude.
I'd like to pick on your point on the some of the sort of social and legal issues, because I think one of the driver of these innovations is that information is becoming more available online, especially
Yeah.
information and data is becoming more open. A lot of governments are opening up their data, and people are using data innovatively to develop various applications. And I'd like to get your insights on what are the concerns related to making to using these information responsibly. So, what are some of the ethical challenges faced by innovators and researchers related to issues on data protection or privacy, and how are some of these issues being resolved?
Yeah, One issue comes in what kind of content can you take photos of and then share. So definitely, if you are working with child relief and children's issues, etc., you should be very careful with posting photos of kids online, etc. Even though it may be nice to use them in promotional brochures and say, here are some kids which got funded by the program, etc., you should be careful about what kinds of content you post online. The second is data sharing between agencies. Many agencies don't want to share the information. Definitely, for instance, police departments are very wary of sharing information about missing people. This came up with the issue of the startup who wanted to share information on reports of missing people during natural disasters. We had this case last month of severe flooding in North India, and about 2 to 5,000 people were missing, reported missing for some time. And people said, why can't we use a smartphone app where you post a picture of someone you know and saying so and so is missing, and anybody in this neighborhood, if you see that person, can you please contact them and tell them here's how we can get back in touch with us, etc. But the issues that come up over here are, how do you know that this is a genuine case of a missing person? What if somebody says, let's take this picture, kidnap the person, and then use them for ransom? So all these kinds of issues come up which people didn't quite factor in the whole thing. So I think this is an issue of also serious concern, which is information sharing, issues of abuse, potential abuse of information. Also, India doesn't yet have a universal ID for all people. It's just beginning now. So you're not quite sure who is the person who's posting all this information, unlike other countries where everyone has at least a license, like in the US, so you know who is who to some extent at least. So there are big challenges with authentication of content and users in many emerging economies.
Thank you. And now looking into the future, what do you think are the future trends in India that you're observing with respect to the use of ICTs for social and economic development?
Yeah, I think first of all, from a device point of view, we will continue to see costs dropping. It may take some more time before we see the $10 or $50 smartphone, but there's some other interesting movements coming in the area of tablets. There's a project called the Akasha project in India to make very cheap tablets. It came under a lot of flack in the beginning because maybe the tendering wasn't very clear for people, or the performance of the device wasn't quite like an iPad. But I've met some of the organizers and some of the managers of this company, including the CEO, and their approach is, we need to make a tablet which is cheap enough and at least good enough for certain basic kinds of educational apps, for instance. So let us not try and compare this with a Samsung tablet or an Apple tablet, etc., but just look at very basic functionality. So I think the tablet space is going to be an interesting one to watch. We've been stuck with very low penetration and diffusion of laptops and desktops in India for many years. It's not going beyond a certain level fast enough, but we think tablets will definitely open up this space, especially in the area of education. So that is one thing to watch. The second thing to watch is more and more local language content. We've been a very English-centric sort of ICT body space in India with quite a few NGOs, yes, in the local language space, but not enough given our huge population base in remote parts of, Tamil Nadu, Bihar, etc., who speak other languages. So we think the appearance of more visually rich devices will also have local language content recognition. Also, for illiterate people who can't read and write, graphical, iconic kind of communication is more useful. Text to speech will be an interesting area to look at. So we'll see a lot of movement in this space also. And the last one is the ecosystem. I think our ecosystem is finally maturing, at least in what they call the tier 1 cities, the big cities, and now it's going to the smaller cities like Pune, Ahmedabad, etc. also. So we're seeing the ecosystem overall, which includes meetups, hackathons, media, etc., investors, social investors, finally picking up. So we're seeing ecosystem maturity as another big trend in the coming years.
Thank you. Before we wrap, can you give some key takeaways or recommendations, particularly for startups or social enterprises in Asia?
Yeah, I would say for startups, this is a very exciting time to be in this space. I wish I was back in college at this time, because now college kids can take part in hackathons and get these funds to go overseas and do field case studies in remote parts of India, etc. So I think this is a very good time. So the message for the youth is, keep your eyes open for all the kinds of information and opportunities out there. See if you can join a meetup. I think a meetup is one of the powerful new things which social media enables now. It's not just talking online, but you can do a tweet up of people in your community, in the city, etc. And these are very good ways to validate your idea, build relationships with people who over the coming years will become successful entrepreneurs themselves, investors themselves, etc. The third one is to put one foot in technology, yes, but put your other foot elsewhere also. So you can integrate mobile in your pet areas. It could be as a hobby, it could be as a doctor, as an engineer. So you don't have to be a pure IT guy anymore to do ICT for T. You have to put one foot in IT solidly, yes, but put the other foot in as many other places as you can, because that is where innovation emerges, when two different fields intersect. When you see technology coming together with health or with education or with transportation, you see very interesting new kinds of innovation. So don't be stuck in just a silo. Do two or three different things and see what kinds of innovation emerge. That's my key message for the startups in our audience. Thanks.
Thank you, Madan. Thank you for taking the time to share your insights with us.
Anytime, anytime. You're most
So we'll be posting this interview recording, and I'll do a written summary to the e-DIRAP community to
yeah.
comment on. And
That,
please keep us updated on what on your work.
yeah. Oh, how does the video look, by the way? Isn't there too much glare on the side? I realized it just now. My window is open. So,
It's
is it
fine.
audio video or audio interview or video?
It's a video recording, so
Yeah.
you're a bit bright on one side, but it's okay.
Yeah. Just realized that. Yes.
No
I'm so
problem.
hot talking that I forgot what the thing looks like. And oh my God, there's a big mess of books. That's okay. That looks fine.
Okay.
Okay.
That's
Thanks so much.